I rise today to offer some thoughts about the current discussion over a vacancy on the Supreme Court. I had high hopes yesterday for the meeting in the White House between the Majority Leader, the Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, President Obama, and Vice President Biden. I had high hopes that that meeting might lead to an opening and a willingness to entertain the important business of filling a vacancy on the Supreme Court. But the announcements made directly after that meeting suggested that, a phrase we sometimes use back home, that the schoolhouse door is going to stay closed. There will not be a debate. There will not be a vote. There will not be a committee hearing. In fact, there was even a suggestion, a commitment that the majority would refuse even to entertain courtesy office visits with the nominee that President Obama is expected to send up soon. I was disappointed in that, and I want to take the floor today to just offer a simple message. It is very important that the Senate do its constitutional duty and do its job with respect to the Supreme Court vacancy. The job is pretty plain. We have a job description like most people do who have jobs. The job description is contained mostly in Article 1 of the Constitution, but there are also descriptions of what we must do in the Senate in Article 2. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution says the President shall nominate and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint a variety of officials, including Supreme Court justices. This is part of our job description to entertain presidential nominations for Supreme Court justices. We volunteer for the job. We take an oath to do the job. We cash a paycheck written by the American people to pay for us to do the job. We frankly don't have the option of refusing to do the job. Is there anything unusual about this situation, a vacancy on the Supreme Court occurring during the last year of a president's term? The answer to that is no. On 17 occasions, this body has entertained and had a confirmation vote on a Supreme Court justice in the final year of a president's term. 17 times. When this happened, people thought it seemed rare, but actually, when you go back and look at the historical record, it's not rare at all. And on each of those occasions, in a presidential election year, the Senate has done its job under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, and entertained a nominee. There is no reason why this Senate should not do exactly the same thing, follow that historical precedent. Madam President, as I've traveled around Virginia in the weeks since the vacancy became open, I've talked to a lot of citizens about this. And it sometimes is helpful, I think, for us in this body to think about the way others, especially our citizens, look at what we're doing or not doing here. And citizens ask me, what possibly could be the reason why the Senate would not follow its clear historical precedent and do a job description that is contained in the Constitution? What would be the reason why Congress would refuse a vote, refuse debate, refuse committee hearings, refuse even to meet with a nominee? Why would Congress not do its job? Why would the Senate not do its job? And Madam President, I've been thinking about that, and I can only conceive of two reasons why this Senate would not do its job, and both of the reasons are highly illegitimate, in my opinion. The first reason, and this is a reason that occurs to many citizens, and they're very, very concerned about this, is that the Senate is announcing that it will not do its job because of the identity of this particular president. The Senate has been willing to do the job for other presidents, but is there something about this particular president that is making the Senate decide to break its historical traditions, violate Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, and not do the job? This question is given some added oomph because of another recent event. President Obama in early February sent to the Congress his budget. Pursuant to the Budget Act of 1974, and this has been followed uniformly by the Senate and the House, when the president sends up a budget, the budget committees have a hearing about the president's budget, even if they don't like it, and they often don't like it. But that's what you do. You have a hearing about the president's budget. If you don't like it, you criticize the budget, and then you write a different budget. That's what's happened for every president since the Budget Control Act of 1974 passed. In the last year of the Bush administration, when there were two Democratic majorities in both houses, when President Bush sent his budget up, hearings were held on the budget. But in this instance, just within the last month, when the budget was sent up from President Obama, both committees said, for this president, breaking the statute, breaking all tradition, we will not even have a hearing on this president's budget. So if we're going to break the constitutional command and break a history in which 17 justices have been confirmed in a presidential year, and if we're going to break it for this president, and if we're going to break the Budget Control Act and break a uniform history since 1974 of not according even a hearing for the budget submitted by this president, then a question that is being asked by the citizens of this country, certainly the citizens of this Commonwealth, is whether the actions taken here on this Supreme Court nomination to not allow a vote, not allow a debate, not allow a committee hearing, and not even allow courtesy office visits is actually not about the Supreme Court at all, not even about the nominee, whosoever it shall be, but it is a particular mark of disrespect for this president that is unprecedented in the history of this body. That's an explanation that many of my citizens are deeply worried about, that many of my citizens are talking about and asking about, and frankly, I don't have a good answer to that concern. There's a second reason that suggests itself to me with respect to breaking all of the historical precedent on this particular Supreme Court vacancy. And Madam President, it connects to another concern that I've taken to the floor many times to talk about as a member of the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees. There's another clause of the Constitution that I care deeply about, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. We should not be at war without a vote of Congress. We're now in the 20th month of a war, and Congress hasn't even voted this war against ISIL. I go to hearings all the time where members of the Senate criticize the president for what he's doing or not doing in the war, but I see a complete unwillingness in this House and the House of Representatives to actually do what the Constitution commands and have a vote on the war. This circumstance reminds me of that. A clear constitutional command in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, a clear historical precedent of the Senate engaging, but now for this president, on this vacancy, a decision, hold on a second. Maybe we can just avoid voting yes or no. If we vote yes for a nominee that the president might send up, we'll make some people mad. If we vote no on a nominee that the president sends up, we'll make some other people mad. Maybe we can just avoid the commands of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, avoid the uniform history of this body, and not vote at all. And if we can avoid voting at all, maybe we can evade accountability. Maybe we can evade the criticism that might come to us from our constituents. That is also highly, highly troubling. But, Madam President, I can't think of any other reasons why this body would violate the clear commands of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, and violate a uniform history of approving 17 Supreme Court justices during a presidential year, other than A, it's fundamentally a sign of disrespect for this particular president, or B, it is a desire by a Senate that certainly has the votes to confirm or deny, consistent with the constitutional provision, to avoid taking a vote and thereby think that we can avoid the accountability of our citizens for casting a vote in something that might be controversial. Needless to say, both of those reasons are highly illegitimate and, in my view, are really beneath what we should be doing in this chamber. Madam President, the last thing I'll say is this. The job description of a senator is laid out in the Constitution, but there are other parts of the job that may not be laid out so plainly, but we all understand to be our job. For example, I don't think it's laid out that we should, passionately represent our citizens and do constituent service for them, but we all understand that's part of the job. Well, another part of the job of a United States Senator that may not be spelled out so directly as the power to advise and consent on nominations or the power to declare war is that we are elected guardians of this institution. And more than just the institution of the Senate, we are elected to be guardians of the democratic traditions that are set out in the Constitution, in this marvelous Constitution that establishes three branches of government that have checks and balances against each other. We should always act, regardless of our disagreements, regardless of our debates or arguments, and the differences of opinion are legitimate, but we should always act to promote respect for our institutions, and not only the institution of the Senate, the institution of the court system that has a vacancy right now in the Supreme Court, the institution of the presidency, who we are sending a signal of disrespect toward by the actions that are being undertaken in this body. It is part of the job we need to do to build up the respect for the institutions of our government. If United States senators don't respect the institutions of our government, why would anyone else respect them? If we act in a way that subvert or tear them down, why would we expect anyone else to respect the institution? I came here to this body because I do respect the institution. I respect its history. We're all humans. We can make mistakes. Votes have been cast that in the light of day, you could look and expect to be different. But compared to other systems in the world, and I lived in a country that was a military dictatorship when I was a young man, and can certainly see the great blessings we have to live here in this country and serve here in this body. But I deeply, deeply fear that the actions that we are embarking on in connection with this Supreme Court nomination are expressing a profound disrespect for the Article III branch, the courts, a profound disrespect for the Article II branch of the presidency, and frankly, a profound disrespect for our own history, traditions, and job description in this Article I branch of the legislature. It is not too late for us to turn this around. It is not too late for us to take a pause, and when the president sends over a nomination for the Supreme Court, to do what justice demands. If justice demands anything, it should be that we would analyze an individual on that person's own merits. Instead of just saying the blanket rule is no matter who you are, no matter what your qualifications, because you are sent by this president, we will create a unique rule for you and refuse to entertain you. We still have time to turn this around. I have no idea when the president will send a nominee over, and I have no idea who that nominee will be. But when that nominee is delivered and recommended to the Senate, it is my prayer that this body will do what Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 demands, that we will do what we have done in every other instance when a president has sent a nominee over in a presidential election year, that we will not bar the schoolhouse door, but we'll open the doors to our office to accord a nominee the courtesy of a discussion, that we will have hearings in the Judiciary Committee, and that we will have a robust debate and a vote on this floor. If that vote is a yes, that will be great. If that vote is a no, that will still be fully in accord with the constitutional job description of this Congress. But to not entertain a nominee at all, in my view, would violate our oath, would violate the Constitution, and would express a significant disrespect for all three branches of government.